the Elizabethan curriculum. A classical education for the modern man. Lecture 11. Virgil, the Underworld, and the Last Sword Stroke. There is a moment in the 6th book of the Aeneid that Dante read so many times he could recite it from memory, that Tennyson called the most tenderly melancholy lines in all poetry, that schoolboys across 16 centuries have construed in cold rooms without always understanding what they were holding. Aeneas is in the underworld. He has found his dead father, Anchises. He tries to embrace him. 3 times he reaches for him. 3 times his arms close on nothing. The shade of his father cannot be held. Sant lacrimae rerum et mentem mortalia tangunt. There are tears in things, and mortal matters touch the mind. It is not quite this line which is from earlier in the poem, but the 2 passages belong together in the reader's memory, because they are both reaching for the same idea, that the world contains grief as one of its fundamental constituents. That loss is not an interruption of the normal order, but part of the fabric of things, and that to be fully alive, to be fully human, is to be touched by this, to feel it, to carry it, and to go on anyway. This is what Aeneas goes into the underworld to learn, not tactics, not the route to Italy. He goes to find his father, and what his father gives him is not comfort in any simple sense, but something harder and more necessary, a vision of what all the suffering has been for. The underworld Virgil constructs in the 6th book is one of the great imaginative achievements of Western literature. It is not Homer's underworld, that grey and joyless place where the shades drift without purpose or memory. Virgil's underworld is morally organized. It has geography that corresponds to the quality of lives lived. The wicked are punished in Tartarus with a specificity and an ingenuity that Dante studied with a professional eye and improved upon only marginally. The virtuous inhabit the Elysian fields in a state of luminous contentment. And in between, in a place called the Vale of Lethe, the souls of the future wait to be reborn, drinking the waters of forgetfulness to prepare for their return to life. It is here that Anchises shows Aeneas the future. The souls waiting by the Lethe are Rome. They are the Romans who will be born from Aeneas's line, who will build what he is sailing toward, who will make of his suffering and his obedience something that justifies, or is supposed to justify, everything. Anchises names them, one by one: Romulus, founder of the city; the kings of Alba Longa, the great figures of the Republic; Brutus, who expelled the kings and established Roman liberty; Fabius Maximus, who saved Rome from Hannibal by the strategy of patient delay; and at the end, the culmination of the vision, Augustus himself, who will bring back the Golden Age, who will extend Roman rule beyond the known world, who will fulfill at last what the gods promised Troy's survivors on the night the city burned. It is magnificent. It is also, if you are paying attention, extremely carefully constructed. Virgil gives Augustus his place at the summit of Roman destiny, while simultaneously surrounding him with the full weight of everything that had to happen for him to be there. The list of Rome's great men is also a list of Rome's great suffering. Brutus, who established liberty, also had to execute his own sons for treason against that liberty. The vision of Roman greatness is inseparable from the vision of Roman cost. Anchises does not present one without the other. Whether Augustus noticed this when the passage was read to him is, as I said about Dido's speech, an interesting question. And then Anchises says the lines that the Elizabethan student was taught to regard as the essential statement of Rome's mission: tu regere imperio populos Romane, memento. Remember, Roman, to rule the peoples with your power. He tibi erunt artes. These will be your arts: to impose the custom of peace, to spare the conquered, and to war down the proud. It is a statement of imperial vocation, and the Elizabethan reader heard it with the full resonance of a civilization that was itself beginning to think in imperial terms, that was looking at the world beyond its shores and asking what England's destiny might be. The translatio imperii, the passing of empire from Rome to later civilizations, was a live idea in Elizabethan political thought, and Virgil's lines gave it a moral framework, not merely to conquer, to impose the custom of peace, to spare the conquered the empire justified by what it does with its power rather than merely by the fact of having it. Whether the Roman Empire or any subsequent empire actually achieved this standard is a question that history answers with considerable irony. Whether Virgil believed it was achievable, or whether the conditional structure of Anchises' speech, remember to do this, these will be your arts, carries within it the acknowledgement that the arts of peace are aspirational rather than actual, is a question scholars have been arguing since the Renaissance. The Elizabethan reader was not expected to resolve it. He was expected to feel its full weight, the vision and the doubt simultaneously present, neither cancelling the other. Aeneas leaves the underworld through the gate of ivory. This is one of the most discussed details in Latin poetry. There are two gates in Virgil's underworld, the gate of horn, through which true shades and true visions pass, and the gate of ivory, through which the shades send false dreams to the upper world. Aeneas and the Sibyl, who has guided him, exit through the gate of ivory. Virgil states this plainly and moves on without comment. He offers no explanation. He has been offering no explanations for the things that trouble the reader throughout the poem, and he is not going to start now. The interpretations are numerous, and none of them entirely satisfying. Some say it is simply a technical matter, that Aeneas is a living person passing through a realm of the dead, and must use the gate appropriate to false or anomalous passages. Some say Virgil is undermining the entire vision of Roman destiny he has just presented, marking it as a beautiful dream rather than a genuine prophecy. Some say the ambiguity is the point, that the poem refuses to tell you whether the vision of Rome's greatness is truth or consoling fiction, because the poem does not know, because Virgil does not know, because in 19 before the Christian era nobody knew whether the Augustan settlement was genuine peace or merely the most recent and most successful form of the violence that had consumed. The ivory gate does not solve the Aeneid's central question. It deepens it, and the deepening continues to the last line. The second half of the Aeneid is the war in Italy. Aeneas arrives in Latium, where he is destined to settle and from whose people Rome will eventually spring. He is promised the hand of Lavinia, daughter of the Latin king. Lavinia had been betrothed to a local prince named Turnus, king of the Rutulians, and Turnus does not accept the situation. War follows, brutal and extended, and Virgil renders it with the same unflinching attention he brought to the fall of Troy. People die in the Aeneid with a specificity that Homer himself does not always match. Young men with names and fathers and futures that are described in the moment of their extinction. Pallas, the young ally of Aeneas, killed by Turnus. Lausus, the son of the Etruscan tyrant Mezentius, killed by Aeneas himself in a scene that Aeneas finds unbearable even as he performs it. Camilla, the warrior maiden, who gets an entire book of the poem and whose death is one of the most elegiac passages Virgil ever wrote. The war is won. Turnus is the last obstacle. The two champions meet in single combat for the final resolution, as epic convention demands. And Aeneas defeats Turnus. Turnus falls. He is wounded, helpless. He appeals to Aeneas for mercy. He acknowledges defeat. He says, "You have won. Lavinia is yours. Do not press your hatred further." And in that moment, Aeneas hesitates. He actually hesitates. He is about to spare him. Then he sees on Turnus's shoulder the sword belt of Pallas, taken by Turnus as a trophy from the body of the young man Aeneas loved like a son, and the grief and rage that Aeneas has been carrying through the entire second half of the poem ignites, and he drives his sword into Turnus's chest, and Turnus dies, and the poem ends. Damit vita dam spiritus artus, while his life fled with a groan into the shades below. That is the last line of the Aeneid. No resolution, no triumph, no founding of Rome, which we never see, no marriage with Lavinia, no golden age, a sword in a chest and a life leaving a body, and then silence. The Elizabethan reader, who had been told that this was the greatest poem in Latin, who had spent years preparing to read it, who had just been taken through the fall of Troy and the love of Dido and the vision of Roman destiny in the underworld, arrived at this ending and found himself standing in a room with no furniture. The expected celebration was not there. The expected resolution was not there. What was there was a killing, performed in passion rather than in judgment by the hero of duty and pietas, the man who had spent 12 books subordinating his own desires to the demands of destiny, finally and completely losing control at the moment of his greatest victory. Is Aeneas right to kill Turnus? The poem will not tell you. Turnus was his enemy, killed his friend, made the war necessary and brutal. The killing is also an act of rage, not justice performed on a helpless man who has asked for mercy. Both of these things are simultaneously true, and the poem holds them in tension, without resolution, exactly as it held the tension between the vision of Rome's greatness and the cost of achieving it, between pietas and the destruction pietas requires, between destiny and the people destiny destroys on its way to fulfillment. Virgil asked for the manuscript to be burned. He had 11 years and he still could not finish it to his satisfaction. Perhaps what he could not resolve was this, that the poem he had been asked to write in celebration of Rome and Augustus and the ordained greatness of the Roman project had become, in the writing, a poem that asked whether ordained greatness is something to celebrate at all, not answered no, asked whether the distinction matters, the cost and the glory are so inextricably bound together in the Aeneid that neither can be properly seen without the other, and Virgil could not find a last line that resolved the tension because the tension does not resolve. The Elizabethan gentleman reading it in the 1590s was reading a poem about what it means to build something that will last, and what must be sacrificed for it to last, and whether the sacrifice is sanctioned by a destiny larger than any individual life. He was reading it in a country that was beginning to understand itself as an imperial project, that was looking at the world beyond its coasts with a mixture of ambition and anxiety that Virgil would have recognized immediately. The Translatio Imperii had reached the Atlantic. England was standing where Rome had stood, and Virgil's question, the one that runs under every book of the Aeneid, like the sound of weeping heard through stone, was England's question too. Is it worth it? And if it is, what must be given? In our next lecture we turn from the epic to something entirely different in tone and register, but equally profound in its influence. The Eclogues and Georgics, Virgil's earlier poems, the pastoral and the agricultural, which seem at first glance to be retreating from the great questions into a simpler world, but which turn out on closer reading to be asking the same questions from a different angle. And we will ask what the Elizabethan reader made of pastoral, and why the idea of a simpler world, a golden age before the iron age of politics and empire, was not an escape from Elizabethan anxieties, but one of their primary expressions. End of Lecture 11.